When the police officer shoved my son-in-law into the back of the cruiser, my daughter screamed at me. She called me a monster. She called me a liar. I just stood there leaning against my rusted pickup truck, watching their lives crumble into dust. Just 24 hours earlier, they were toasting to a lifetime of happiness, while plotting to throw me into a damp basement. They thought I was just a broke retired mechanic clinging to a worthless piece of land. They had no idea that the greasy hands they refused to shake had signed a trust fund document worth $30 million 2 years ago. I kept my mouth shut to protect them. Now I keep it shut because I have nothing left to say to the people who tried to bury me alive. Before I tell you how I destroyed their greed with a single signature, let me know in the comments if you think secrets can save a family or destroy it. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach someone a lesson they will never forget. The last notes of the jazz band faded into the humid Florida night. Waiters were already stripping the white tablecloths, sweeping away the confetti that had cost more than my entire wardrobe. I sat alone at table 19, the one furthest from the head table, nursing a glass of lukewarm water. My tuxedo was a rental that smelled faintly of mothballs and someone else's cologne, and it felt like a straitjacket. I watched my daughter Lily laughing with her new bridesmaids across the room. She looked beautiful, radiant, and completely unaware that her father was invisible to her. I had emptied my checking account to pay for the flowers, a modest contribution that Brandon, my new son-in-law, had sneered at during the rehearsal dinner. To them, I was just Doug Bennett, the retired mechanic who lived in a shack on 50 acres of swampland. A relic. An embarrassment. I was about to stand up and leave quietly when a shadow fell over my table. It was Brandon. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't holding a piece of wedding cake for me. He was holding a leather portfolio. Beside him stood a man in a gray suit who looked like he charged by the minute. Brandon pulled out a chair and sat down, not asking if he could join me. He placed the portfolio on the table with a heavy thud, pushing aside the centerpiece of white roses. The man in gray opened his briefcase and produced a stamp. A notary public. My stomach tightened. This was not a thank you conversation. Brandon looked me in the eye, his gaze cold and predatory. "Dad," he said, dropping the word like a stone. "Lily and I have been talking. We need to handle some business before you head back to that dump you call a house." He slid a document toward me. It was a deed transfer. I stared at the bold letters. Quitclaim deed. He wanted my land. He wanted the 50 acres of scrub brush and old oaks that had been in the Bennett family for 3 generations. "Sign here," Brandon commanded, pointing a manicured finger at the signature line. "We are going to use the land as collateral for a business loan. You are too old to manage it anyway. Once we build our new house on the lot, we will fix up the basement for you. It will be safer than that rotting cabin." I looked at the notary. He stared blankly at the wall. I looked back at Brandon. This was an ambush. On his wedding night, he wasn't thinking about his bride. He was thinking about my property. I pushed the paper back. "I don't understand, Brandon. This is my home. I am not signing anything tonight." My voice was steady, though my hands shook beneath the table. I wasn't shaking from fear. I was shaking from rage. Brandon laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Don't be difficult, old man. You have no money. You have no assets. This land is the only thing of value you possess, and you are letting it go to waste. Sign the paper." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the parquet floor. "I want to speak to my daughter." I expected Brandon to block me, to threaten me. Instead, he just smirked and waved his hand. Lily was already walking toward us. She must have been watching, waiting. My heart surged with a foolish hope. Lily would stop this. Lily was my little girl, the one I had raised on my own after her mother died. She would tell Brandon he was crossing a line. Lily stopped beside her husband. She didn't look at me. She looked at the document. Dad, please, she said, her voice tired as if dealing with a stubborn child. Just sign it. Brandon needs the capital for his startup. You know we have bills. The wedding cost a fortune. I felt the blood drain from my face. You know about this? I asked. You want me to sign away my home? Lily finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard. It is just dirt, Dad. 50 acres of dirt. You are 72 years old. You shouldn't be living out there alone anyway. The basement in our new place will be nice. We will get you a TV. Consider it a way to pay us back. Pay you back. For what? For raising you. For loving you. For the flowers sitting on these tables. For not being the rich father you wanted. The realization hit me harder than a physical blow. My daughter wasn't a victim here. She was a co-conspirator. She wasn't protecting me. She was harvesting me. The love I thought existed was conditional, and the condition was that I make myself useful to their ambitions. I looked at the notary, then at Brandon, and finally at Lily. I saw no affection. I saw only greed disguised as pragmatism. I sat back down slowly. The fight left my shoulders, or so I let them believe. I hunched over, making myself look smaller, older, more defeated. Fine, I whispered. If this is what you want. Brandon snapped his fingers. The notary uncapped a fountain pen and handed it to me. I took it with a trembling hand. I brought the pen tip close to the paper. Brandon leaned in, his eyes hungry. Lily let out a breath she had been holding. I watched the black ink pool at the tip of the nib. Then, with a sudden, violent spasm of my hand, I drove the pen into the paper, tearing the page and sending a spray of black ink across the document and onto the white tablecloth. Oops, I muttered, dropping the pen. My hand. It spasms sometimes. I am so sorry. Brandon grabbed the document. It was ruined. The signature line was a black blotch. He looked at me with pure hatred. You clumsy old fool, he hissed. That was the original. The notary sighed, checking his watch. I don't have another copy, Mr. Bennett. It is late. Brandon slammed his fist on the table. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., we are coming to the house. Have your things packed. We will bring a new deed. Do not make me come looking for you, Doug. I stood up, feigning confusion and shame. I will be there, I said. I am sorry. I walked out of the ballroom without looking back. I didn't go home. I couldn't. They would be watching. I drove my rattling Ford F-150 5 miles down the highway to a truck stop that still had a working payphone. I fished a quarter out of my pocket and dialed a number I had memorized but never called. It rang twice. O'Malley, I said, when the gruff voice answered. It is Doug Bennett. Initiate Phase 1. The vultures have started circling. On the other end, I heard the click of a lighter and a deep exhale. About time, Doug. I have the paperwork ready. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we go to war. 7 in the morning arrives differently when you are waiting for a siege. Usually the sunrise over my 50 acres is the only church I need. The light filters through the Spanish moss draped over the ancient oaks, turning the morning mist into gold. It is quiet. It is mine. But today the silence was a lie. I sat at my laminate kitchen table, the one with the cigarette burn from 1982, nursing a mug of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. My hands were steady, resting on the formica, but my gut was twisting like a rusted bolt. I had not slept. I had spent the night planting the landmines O'Malley, and I had discussed replacing real bank statements with fabrications, hiding the true deed inside the lining of my old toolbox, and leaving just enough bait to keep the predators hungry. I was ready, or so I told myself. But being ready for a fight and being ready to watch your own child dismantle your life are two very different things. The sound came first. It wasn't a knock. It was the roar of diesel engines. Not one, but two massive moving trucks rumbled down my gravel driveway, kicking up clouds of dust that coated my porch in a layer of gray grit. They didn't park, they occupied. The air brakes hissed like snakes, silencing the birds. I didn't move from my chair. I just watched through the window as the invasion began. Brandon stepped out of the lead truck's passenger side. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo anymore. He was wearing designer jeans and a polo shirt that looked like it cost more than my truck, and he walked with the swagger of a man who had already won the lottery. He didn't look at the trees or the land. He looked at my front door like it was an obstacle to be kicked down. The front door flew open without a warning. The lock, old and loose, didn't offer any resistance. Brandon strode into my living room, the humidity of the morning following him in. He spotted me in the kitchen and didn't even blink. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I slept. He just clapped his hands together and shouted over his shoulder, "Bring the boxes in. Put the old man's junk in the shed. We need this room clear for the office." Just like that. My living room, the place where I had taught Lily to read. The place where I had held my wife's hand as she took her last breath, was being repurposed. I stood up slowly, my joints popping. "Excuse me," I said, my voice raspy. "I don't recall giving you a key or permission." Brandon walked right up to me, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive mints and aggression. "We are family, Doug. Family doesn't need permission. Besides, we are doing you a favor. We are here to help you pack. You can't manage this place. Look at it. It is filthy." He ran a finger over the counter and wiped the dust on his pants with a grimace. Lily walked in then. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed, but she avoided my gaze. She was carrying a box of kitchen supplies, her own high-end blender, her spice rack. She was moving in. She was displacing me. "Lily," I said softly. She flinched. "Hi, Dad," she muttered, setting the box down on my table right next to my elbow. "Look, let's just get this over with quickly. Brandon is stressed. We just need to get settled so he can start working on the loan application." Get settled. The phrase hung in the air. They weren't visiting. They were colonizing. Two movers, burly men, who looked like they were paid not to ask questions, started hauling my furniture out. My recliner, the one molded perfectly to my back after 10 years of solitaire, was hoisted up and marched out the door. "Hey," I shouted, moving to stop them. "Put that down. That is my chair." Brandon stepped in front of me, his hand pressing firmly against my chest. He was strong, younger, fueled by a desperation I hadn't fully understood yet. "Let it go, Doug. You are going to the basement, remember? You won't have room for that garbage down there. We are bringing in a leather sectional. You will thank me later." He pushed me back. It wasn't a violent shove, not yet, but it was a physical assertion of dominance. In my own kitchen, I stumbled back against the counter. The rage flared hot and white behind my eyes. I could have snapped his wrist. I spent 40 years wrenching lug nuts and lifting engine blocks. My grip strength was iron, but I remembered O'Malley's voice on the burner phone last night. "Let them hang themselves, Doug. Do not fight back physically. Let them think you are weak." So I let my shoulders slump. I let my hands tremble. I looked at Lily, silently begging her to intervene. She was busy unwrapping bubble wrap from a crystal vase. She was choosing her decor over her father. The worst part wasn't the furniture. It was the violation of my sanctuary. Brandon left the movers in the living room and headed straight down the hall to the spare bedroom I used as an office. It was where I kept my life, my schematics, my old repair manuals, the drawings of the engines I had rebuilt, and the few framed photos of my wife that I couldn't bear to keep in the open. I followed him, feigning a limp I didn't have. He was already inside, pulling drawers out of my metal filing cabinet and dumping them onto the floor. Paper rained down. Receipts from 1995, tax returns, letters from old army buddies. He was looking for the deed. He was looking for bank books. He was looking for the money he felt entitled to. "What are you doing?" I cried out, dropping to my knees to gather a handful of scattered letters. "These are private." Brandon kicked a stack of papers aside. "Nothing is private when you are living under my roof, Doug. And make no mistake, this is my roof now. You are just a guest until we sign that paper." "Where is it? Where is the deed to the land?" "I know you have it. The notary is coming back at noon. Do not make me tear this house apart stud by stud." He began sweeping the shelves with his arm. My collection of vintage spark plugs, small tokens of a lifetime of work, crashed to the floor. Ceramic shattered. Metal clanged against wood. He didn't care. To him, it was just trash. To me, it was my history. I looked up at him from the floor, clutching a photo of Lily's mother to my chest. "It is in the safe," I lied, my voice shaking with a feigned terror that wasn't entirely acting. The terror was real, but it wasn't for me. It was for what he was becoming. "I lost the combination. I can't remember it. My mind, it gets foggy." Brandon sneered. "Of course it does. Convenient. Well, you better remember it, old man, or I will take a crowbar to that safe." He turned and stomped out of the room, yelling at Lily to start clearing out the pantry because he didn't want to eat my expired canned food. I was left alone in the wreckage of my office. My sanctuary had been violated. The air felt thinner, harder to breathe. I could hear them in the kitchen laughing now, talking about paint colors, discussing which wall to knock down to open up the space. They were erasing me. I was still in the house, but I was already a ghost to them. I stood up, dusting off my knees. I carefully placed the photo of my wife in my pocket. I walked to the window and looked out at the old oak tree in the backyard. They thought they had stripped me of my power. They thought they had taken my dignity. But as I watched Brandon outside yelling at the movers to be careful with his 60-inch television, I felt a cold resolve settle in my chest. They had invaded my home. They had broken my things, but they hadn't found the truth. And the truth was the only weapon I needed. I reached into the hidden pocket of my work trousers and touched the cold plastic of the burner phone. Phase 1 was over. We were in the occupation now, and insurgents always win the long war. The kitchen smelled of stale coffee and the overpowering citrus scent of the cleaning products Lily was using to scrub away my existence. I sat at the small table in the corner, the one Brandon hadn't ordered the movers to take, yet hunched over a bowl of instant oatmeal made with water because they had thrown out my milk. I made my hands tremble as I lifted the spoon to my mouth, spilling a little on the table. It was a calculated performance. I needed them to see a broken man, a senile old fool who couldn't even manage his breakfast, let alone a 50-acre estate. If they thought I was weak, they would get careless. And carelessness was the only crack I needed to pry their entire operation apart. Brandon walked in, talking loudly on his phone, pacing the floorboards I had laid with my own hands 30 years ago. He was wearing a headset, looking like a Wall Street broker who had taken a wrong turn into a swamp. He ignored me, kicking my work boots under the counter with a scoff of disgust. I lowered my head, staring at the gray sludge in my bowl, but my ears were tuned to a frequency he couldn't hear. I spent 40 years listening to engines. I could tell you if a piston was misfiring or a timing belt was loose just by the hum of a hood. People aren't much different. And Brandon's engine was running hot. He was desperate. I waited until he hung up the call. Then, with the practiced clumsiness of an old man losing his grip, I reached for a napkin and knocked over a stack of envelopes I had placed on the edge of the table. They scattered across the linoleum floor, sliding toward Brandon's expensive loafers. I gasped a sharp, fearful sound and scrambled out of my chair to gather them. "No, no," I muttered, dropping to my knees. "Not those. Please, not those." It was the perfect bait. Brandon looked down, his eyes catching the bold red stamps on the envelopes. "Past due. Final notice. Department of Revenue. Foreclosure warning." He didn't step back. He stepped forward, planting his foot on the pile before I could reach it. "What is this, Doug?" he asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. "Nothing," I stammered, clawing at his shoe. "Just junk mail. Old stuff. I'll throw it away." He kicked my hand away, not hard enough to break bone, but hard enough to show me who was in charge. He bent down and scooped up the letters. I watched his face as he read them. Confusion turned to shock, and shock curled into a smile so cruel it made my blood run cold. He wasn't worried about my debts. He was thrilled by them. "Lily," he shouted, waving a letter from a collection agency that O'Malley had forged on a typewriter from the 60s. "You need to see this. Your father isn't just a hoarder. He is destitute." Lily ran in from the hallway, a microfiber cloth in her hand. "What is it? What happened?" Brandon shoved the papers into her face. "Look at this. 10,000 owed to the credit union, 5,000 in back taxes, a lien on the truck. He is drowning, Lily. He is completely underwater." He laughed, a barking sound. "And to think you felt bad about taking the house. Honey, we aren't taking it. We are saving it from the auction block." I sat back on my heels on the cold floor, looking up at them. I let my mouth hang open slightly, feigning the panic of a man whose darkest secrets had been exposed. I can explain," I wheezed. "I was waiting for a check. A customer. He didn't pay me." "A customer," Brandon mocked, tossing the letters onto the counter. "You haven't had a customer in 5 years, Doug. You are a retired mechanic with a shed full of rust. You fixed lawnmowers. You didn't run a business. You ran a charity for scrap metal." I lowered my eyes, hiding the spark of fury that threatened to ignite. He didn't know. He saw grease under my fingernails and assumed I was simple. He didn't know that those hands had rebuilt engines for classic Ferraris and vintage planes. He didn't know that the rust in my shed included a completely restored 1967 Shelby Mustang covered in a tarp that was worth more than his life insurance policy. He certainly didn't know that my grandfather wasn't just a blue-collar worker, but a mining magnate who had taught me that true wealth is quiet. "Loud money is stupid money," he used to say. I chose the grease. I chose the work because I loved the logic of machines. Machines don't lie. They don't marry your daughter to steal your land. Lily was reading a fake notice from the IRS. Her face pale. "Dad, how could you let it get this bad?" she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want you to worry," I said, my voice cracking. "I thought I could handle it." "Handle it," Brandon interrupted, stepping over me to grab a bottle of water from the fridge. "You can't handle tying your shoes, Doug. This is exactly why we had to intervene. You are incompetent. You have been sitting on a goldmine of land while racking up debt like a teenager with his first credit card. It is pathetic." He took a long swig of water, staring down at me with absolute contempt. "You know what this means, right? It means you have no leverage. None. You can't refuse to sign the deed because if you do, the bank takes it anyway. We are your only option. We are the only thing standing between you and a cardboard box under the overpass." I slowly pulled myself up, using the edge of the table, making my knees pop loudly. I pretended to wipe a tear from my eye. "I am sorry," I mumbled. "I just wanted to leave something for you, Lily." "You have left us a mess," Brandon spat. "That is what you left. A mess we have to clean up." He turned to Lily, his voice softening into that manipulative tone he used so well. "Babe, this settles it. We have to expedite the transfer. We need to get the loan approved before these liens hit the public record. We need to get him declared incapable of managing his assets. It is for his own good. Look at him. He is hiding debt letters like a child hiding a bad report card." Lily looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of the daughter I used to know. The little girl who used to hand me wrenches and ask how gears worked. But then she looked at the fake debt, at the peeling paint on the walls, at her husband, who promised her a life of luxury she was too weak to earn herself. The flicker died. She hardened. You are right, she said to Brandon. We can't trust him. That sentence was the final severance. My own daughter looked at me and saw a liability, not a father. She didn't see the man who had sat up with her when she had fevers, who had paid for her college tuition with money I earned bleeding over hot engines. She saw a balance sheet in the red. Brandon smiled, satisfied. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, heavy and condescending. Don't worry, Pops. We will take care of it. We will pay off these little debts once the loan comes through. Then we will find you a nice spot in the basement. I will even let you keep your recliner, if it fits. He walked out of the kitchen laughing, already dialing his lawyer on the phone. I heard him say, "It is better than we thought. The old guy is broke. He is desperate. He will sign anything." I stood in the kitchen listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Lily avoided my eyes and went back to scrubbing the counter, erasing me one wipe at a time. I looked at the pile of fake letters. O'Malley had done a beautiful job. The paper stock was correct, the fonts official. They were a work of art. But the real masterpiece was the assumption Brandon had made. He assumed that because I lived simply, I was simple. He assumed that because I didn't flash cash, I didn't have it. He didn't know about the trust. He didn't know that the debt was a smokescreen to hide the $30 million sitting in an account that required my biometric signature to access. He didn't know that I had spent the last 10 years studying contract law as a hobby because machines were getting too easy to fix, and I needed a new puzzle. I picked up my spoon and went back to my oatmeal. It was cold and gluey, but I forced myself to eat it. I needed the energy. The hunger in my belly was nothing compared to the hunger for justice that was waking up inside me. Brandon thought he had found a vulnerability. He thought he had kicked a dog while it was down. He didn't realize he had just walked into the cage of a wolf that had been waiting patiently for the right moment to bite. I let my hand shake as I took another bite, spilling a drop of gruel on my chin. I didn't wipe it off. Let them see the mess. Let them see the decay. It made the camouflage perfect. Inside my head, the gears were turning smooth and silent and oiled with oil. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. By mid-afternoon, the transformation of my home into a prison was nearly complete. I was sitting in the corner of the living room on a hard wooden chair because my recliner was gone, pretending to read a newspaper from 3 days ago. I watched Lily crouch behind the entertainment center, her hands fumbling with the nest of wires connected to the modem. She pulled a plug. The little green lights on the router flickered and died. The hum of the digital world vanished. "What are you doing?" Lily, I asked, keeping my voice thin and confused. "My email." I checked the weather report. Lily stood up, dusting off her knees. She didn't look at me. She looked at the blank router. "We are cutting costs, Dad. Internet is expensive. You don't use it enough to justify the bill, and Brandon needs the bandwidth for his phone. We are switching to a mobile hotspot plan just for us. You won't need it. I won't need it." The sentence hung there, stripping me of my connection to the outside world. They were isolating me. It was a classic tactic. I had seen it used by shady car dealerships trying to pressure a customer into a bad deal. Keep them in the room, take away their ability to check prices, make them feel like the only way out is to sign. Brandon walked in, then holding a pair of wire cutters. He saw the dark router and nodded approvingly. "Good. One less bill." He turned his gaze to me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He walked over, his hand extended, palm up. "Phone," he said. I clutched my old scratched smartphone to my chest. It was 5 years old, the screen cracked in the corner, but it was mine. "Why?" I asked, letting my lower lip tremble. "I need to call the pharmacy." Brandon sighed, an exaggerated sound of patience wearing thin. "We are putting you on a family plan, Doug, to save money." We need to cancel your current contract. Give me the phone. I will get you a new one. A simpler one. One with big buttons so you don't get confused. He didn't wait for me to hand it over. He reached out and plucked it from my grip. His fingers were strong, unyielding. I let him take it. If I had fought, he would have overpowered me, and I needed him to believe I was physically incapable of resistance. He slid my phone into his pocket. I will handle this, he said. Don't worry about the pharmacy. Lily will pick up your meds. You don't need to be making calls anyway. You get confused. You ordered 3 pizzas last week, remember? I hadn't ordered any pizzas. It was a lie, a gaslighting attempt so transparent it was almost insulting. But I nodded slowly, staring at my empty hands. I forgot, I mumbled. I thought I was hungry. You see, Brandon said to Lily, gesturing at me like I was a broken appliance. He is slipping. It is irresponsible to let him have unrestricted access. Who knows who he would call scammers target people like him? Lily bit her lip, looking at me with a mixture of pity and guilt, but she didn't stop him. She let him pocket my lifeline. She let him sever this last cord holding me to the world beyond these 50 acres. The rest of the day was a study in confinement. I was a ghost in my own house. I walked down the hallway, and they stopped talking. I entered the kitchen, and they watched me until I left. Without the TV, without the internet, without my phone, the hours stretched out like warm taffy. I paced the perimeter of the rooms, counting the steps, mapping the changes they had made. They thought they were breaking my spirit. They thought that by taking away my tools of communication, they were rendering me helpless. They didn't know about the backup. I had spent 40 years preparing for disasters. You don't work on engines without learning that systems fail, parts break, and you always need a redundancy. Years ago, when I first set up the trust, I had buried a waterproof Pelican case inside the ceramic tank of an old broken toilet that sat in the weeds behind the tool shed. It was my just-in-case insurance. It contained a burner phone with a prepaid SIM card, a solar charger, and a list of emergency numbers laminated in plastic. Brandon had looked in the shed. He had looked in the house. But he hadn't looked inside the toilet tank because he was a man who wore $500 shoes and wouldn't touch porcelain stained with rust and algae. His arrogance was my security clearance. Night fell, bringing a heavy, wet darkness to the property. The humidity rose, clinging to the windows. Brandon and Lily ordered takeout sushi paid for with one of the credit cards they had likely maxed out already. They didn't ask me what I wanted. They gave me a bowl of white rice and told me the raw fish would upset my stomach. I ate the rice. I waited. By midnight, the house was quiet. Brandon snored, a jagged, rhythmic sound that vibrated through the thin walls. Lily was silent. I waited another hour just to be sure. At 1 a.m, I slipped out of bed. I didn't turn on a light. I knew these floorboards better than the lines on my own face. I knew which board creaked in the hallway, the third one from the left, and which door hinge needed oil, the pantry. I moved like smoke, stepping over the threshold of the back door and easing it open. The night air hit me thick with the scent of pine and decay. I didn't walk upright. I hunched low, keeping to the shadows of the eaves, moving away from the house toward the overgrown patch of yard where the old shed stood. The moon was obscured by clouds, which was a blessing. I reached the old toilet, a porcelain throne overtaken by vines and spiderwebs. It looked like garbage. It looked like neglect. To me, it looked like freedom. I lifted the heavy ceramic lid of the tank. It scraped softly, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet night. I paused, heart hammering against my ribs, listening for any movement from the house. Nothing. Just the cicadas and the distant hoot of an owl. I reached into the stagnant water, my hand brushing against the slime of the tank walls, until my fingers closed around the plastic handle of the case. I pulled it out, dripping, and wiped it on the leg of my pajama pants. I retreated into the depths of the shed behind a stack of rotting lumber, where no line of sight from the house could reach me. I cracked the case open. The burner phone sat there dry and fully charged. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up a beacon of blue light in the darkness. I shielded it with my hand. I dialed O'Malley. He answered on the first ring. He was an insomniac and a shark. He never slept when there was blood in the water. "Talk to me, Doug," his voice grated out low and rough. "They cut the lines." I whispered, my voice barely audible over the insect hum. "Internet is gone. My personal cell is confiscated. I am in a blackout." "Predictable," O'Malley said. He sounded pleased. "It means they are escalating. They are trying to hide something, or they are trying to hide you." "Did they mention the loan?" "They mentioned a business loan," I said. "They are rushing. Brandon is jumpy. He is checking the windows. He is sweating even when the AC is on. He should be sweating." O'Malley chuckled darkly. "My PI found the leak. Brandon isn't starting a business, Doug. He is trying to plug a hole. He owes $2 million to a syndicate in Miami. Crypto futures and offshore betting. The guys he owes, they don't send overdue notices. They send guys with baseball bats. That is why he needs the land. He needs to liquidate it fast. He doesn't want a loan to build. He wants a loan to pay off a hit." The information settled in my gut like a stone. 2 million. My daughter wasn't just married to a loser. She was married to a dead man walking. And she was the collateral damage. "Is Lily in danger?" I asked the mechanic in me, analyzing the structural failure of my family. "If he doesn't pay, yes. If he tries to run, yes. You are the only asset he has, Doug. You are his life insurance. If you sign that deed, he flips the land to a developer he has already lined up. I found the emails and he pays his debt. If you don't sign, he will get desperate." I finished. "Exactly. He is going to try to force your hand. He needs you incompetent or he needs you compliant. Expect a doctor. Expect a lawyer. Expect him to stop asking nicely." "He already stopped asking nicely," I said, looking at the dark outline of my house. "He is starving me out, O'Malley. He thinks I am weak." "Good," O'Malley said. "Let him think that. The weaker you look, the bolder he gets. And we need him bold. We need him to commit a felony on record. We need him to try to forge your signature or coerce you in front of a witness. Keep the phone hidden. Check in every night at 2 a.m. And Doug, don't sign anything, not even a birthday card. If he puts a pen in your hand, you break it, you drop it, you fake a seizure. Do whatever you have to do. We are almost there. The trap is primed." I hung up and powered down the phone. I placed it back in the case, sealed it, and submerged it back into the toilet tank. The water was cold, but my hands were burning. I crept back toward the house, moving with the slow, deliberate patience of a predator stalking prey. As I slipped back into my bed, pulling the thin quilt up to my chin, I stared at the ceiling. I wasn't just an old man in a room anymore. I was a sleeper agent in enemy territory. Brandon had taken my phone, but he had given me something much more valuable, a target. He was drowning, and he was trying to use my back as a raft. He didn't realize that I wasn't floating. I was the anchor, and I was about to drag him all the way down to the bottom. I closed my eyes, visualizing the engine of his destruction. The pistons were firing. The pressure was building. Tomorrow he would bring the doctor. Tomorrow he would try to steal my mind. Let him try. Let him. I had $30 million of armor and a lifetime of grit. I wasn't trapped in here with them. They were trapped in here with me. The humidity on the third night was thick enough to choke a man. The air conditioning unit rattled and wheezed, struggling against the Florida heat, but Brandon refused to lower the thermostat below 78 degrees. He said it was about economy, about saving every penny for our future, but I knew it was just another bar in the cage he was building around me. I lay on the twin mattress they had dragged into the guest room, staring at the ceiling fan that wobbled on its axis. My body was still pretending to be asleep, but my mind was racing, like an engine redlining in neutral. At 2 in the morning, the silence of the house shattered. It wasn't a loud noise, just the heavy thud of the sliding glass door hitting its track downstairs. Then came the pacing, back and forth on the wooden deck, the heavy, angry footsteps of a man who was running out of road. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the floorboards. I knew this house. I knew that the vent in the guest room floor connected directly to the ductwork running under the porch. It was an acoustic quirk I had discovered 20 years ago and never fixed because I liked hearing the rain hitting the deck. Now it was my wiretap. I lay on the floor, pressing my ear against the cold metal grate. Brandon's voice drifted up, distorted by distance but clear in its desperation. He wasn't talking to Lily. He was talking to someone he feared. "Please listen to me," Brandon hissed, his voice tight with panic. "I just need 48 hours. The old man is breaking. He is senile. He doesn't know what day it is. I will have the signature by tomorrow afternoon." I held my breath. There was a pause, a silence where the person on the other end was speaking. Then Brandon spoke again, and the arrogance I had seen for days was gone, replaced by the whimpering of a cornered animal. No, you can't do that. We had a deal. 2 million. The land covers the 2 million plus the interest. It is 50 acres of prime development real estate. I have the appraisal. It is worth it. Just don't. Please don't send anyone to the house. $2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow to the chest. O'Malley had been right, but even he had underestimated the volatility of the situation. This wasn't just gambling debt or a failed startup. $2 million was blood money. You don't owe that kind of cash to a bank or a credit card company. You owe that to people who solve problems with concrete shoes and swamp tours. Brandon hadn't married my daughter for love. He hadn't even married her for the land. He had married her as a human shield. I pressed my ear harder against the grate, straining to hear every syllable. "I understand," Brandon said, his voice trembling now. "I understand the timeline. If I don't have the deed transfer faxed to you by Friday at noon, the deal is off. I know. I know what happens next. Please leave Lily out of this. She doesn't know the specifics. She just thinks it is business capital." A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept over me. He was bargaining for my daughter's safety. He had put her on the table as collateral. The realization shifted something fundamental inside me. For the last 3 days, I had been playing a game of chess. I was the underestimated grandmaster teaching a lesson to a greedy novice. I was fighting for my dignity, for my grandfather's legacy, for the satisfaction of seeing the look on Brandon's face when I revealed the truth. But this was no longer a game. This was war. The objective had shifted from protecting my assets to ensuring my survival, and God help me saving the daughter who had betrayed me. The sliding door opened again. I heard the lighter tread of bare feet. "Lily. Who are you talking to?" Her voice was small, frightened. "It is 3 in the morning, Brandon." "Go back inside, Lily." Brandon snapped. The veneer of the loving husband was cracking, revealing the terrified coward underneath. "Is it them?" Lily asked, her voice rising in pitch. "Is it the people from the city? You told me you handled it. You told me if we got the house, they would back off." "I am handling it," Brandon shouted, and I heard the sickening sound of a hand slamming against the wooden railing. "But your father is dragging his feet. He is playing the confused old man, and he is going to get us killed. Do you understand? If he doesn't sign that paper tomorrow, it is over. They aren't going to just take the car, Lily. They are going to come for us." I heard Lily sobbing, a soft, broken sound that twisted a knife in my gut. "I didn't want to do this," she wept. "I hate looking at him like that. He looks so pathetic. We are stealing his home, Brandon. We are saving our lives." Brandon grabbed her. I could hear the scuffle, the fabric rustling. Listen to me. Stop crying. Tears won't pay the debt. We need him declared incompetent. We need that doctor to sign off on the evaluation. If he won't do it willingly, we force it. Do you hear me? We stop being nice, we stop feeding him. We lock him in that room until he breaks. Because if he doesn't break, we die. I pulled away from the vent, sitting back on my heels in the dark room. My hands were clenched into fists so tight my knuckles ached. I had been waiting for the right moment to reveal the trust fund, thinking I could shame them into morality. I was a fool. You can't shame a drowning man. Brandon was going to escalate. He wasn't going to wait for legal channels anymore. He was desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. I crawled back into bed, but I didn't close my eyes. I stared at the shadows moving across the wall. The dynamic had changed. I wasn't just defending my property. I was defending my life. And Lily, my poor, weak, misguided Lily, she wasn't just a conspirator. She was a hostage to her own bad choices. If I revealed the money now, Brandon would hand it straight to the cartel and we would still be in danger because once you pay a blackmailer, you never stop paying. No, I couldn't just write a check. I had to neutralize the threat. I had to destroy Brandon's hold on this family completely. I needed to separate him from Lily, separate him from the land, and put him in a place where his debts couldn't hurt us. I reached under the mattress and touched the handle of the fillet knife I had taped there earlier that day, a precaution I had thought was paranoid at the time. Now it felt inadequate. I needed O'Malley. I needed to accelerate the timeline. The fake doctor visit was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Brandon thought he was setting a trap for me. He didn't know that I had just overheard the combination to his destruction. I lay there listening to them, come back inside listening to the lock click shut. I was an old man in a room with a knife and a burner phone up against a $2 million debt, and a son-in-law who had run out of options. Motivation is a powerful fuel. Yesterday, I wanted to teach them a lesson. Today, I was preparing to survive the lesson they were trying to teach me. I closed my eyes and visualized the engine of my plan. It needed more gas. It needed a spark. And tomorrow, when Brandon brought his fake doctor into my home, I was going to light the fuse. The morning sun sliced through the blinds like a blade, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air of the living room. I was sitting in the hard wooden chair, my hands folded in my lap, staring at a spot on the wallpaper that had started to peel back in 1998. I was ready. I had spent the last hour practicing my tremors, refining the vacant stare that I knew would sell the performance. When the front door opened, I didn't flinch. I let my head loll to the side, my mouth hanging open just a fraction of an inch. Brandon walked in first, his energy manic and vibrating. He was wearing a fresh shirt, but it was untucked at the back and his eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who was holding on to sanity by a very thin thread. Behind him shuffled a man who looked about as much like a doctor as I looked like a ballerina. He was short, balding, with a complexion the color of wet dough. He wore a white lab coat that was a size too big, the sleeves partially covering his hands, and underneath, I could see a stained Hawaiian shirt tucked into slacks that had seen better decades. He carried a battered leather satchel that looked like it had been bought at a pawn shop an hour ago. Dad, Brandon said, his voice loud and overly enunciated like he was speaking to a toddler or a foreigner. "This is Dr. Calloway. He is a specialist. He is here to check on you, to make sure your mind is strong." Dr. Calloway stepped forward, offering a smile that revealed yellowed teeth. He smelled of stale tobacco and peppermint gum, a combination used to mask the scent of last night's whiskey. I knew the type. I had seen them at the dog track 100 times. This wasn't a medical professional. This was a guy who owed Brandon money, or perhaps they owed the same shark. "Hello, Mr. Bennett," the fake doctor said, pulling a plastic chair up so close our knees touched. "I just want to ask you a few simple questions." "Is that okay?" I blinked slowly, letting my gaze drift past his ear to the window. Who are you? I croaked. Are you the tax man I paid the taxes? In '68. I paid them. Brandon exchanged a look with Calloway, a smirk playing on his lips. See, he is completely gone. He thinks it is the '60s. Calloway nodded, pulling a clipboard from his bag. He pretended to make a note, but I saw the pen didn't even touch the paper. Let's not jump to conclusions, he said, playing the part. Mr. Bennett, can you tell me what day it is? I furrowed my brow, acting as if the question required immense cognitive effort. It is Sunday. We have to go to church. Martha needs her hat. It is Wednesday, Doug Brandon interrupted, impatient. And Martha has been dead for 10 years. I recoiled as if he had slapped me. Dead, no. She is in the garden. She is planting the petunias. I stood up, feigning agitation, looking toward the back door. I need to tell her. The frost is coming. Sit down, Dad. Brandon pushed me back into the chair, his grip hard on my shoulder. Calloway, write that down. Hallucinations, disorientation, unable to distinguish past from present. That is grounds for incompetence, right? Technically, yes, Calloway mumbled, actually writing something this time. But we need to establish financial incapacity. That is the key for the power of attorney. He leaned in again, his breath hot on my face. Mr. Bennett, do you know how much money you have in the bank? I narrowed my eyes, shifting my demeanor from confused to suspicious. This was the trap. If I said I had no money, they would use the debt letters as proof of my ruin. If I said I had money, they would ask where. I had to pivot. I had to give them something that confirmed their bias, but distracted them from the legal paperwork. Banks are thieves, I whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. I don't use banks. Not anymore. Not since the crash. Which crash? Calloway asked. The 2008 crash. The big one, I shouted, slamming my hand on my knee. The one where they took the paper. But they didn't get the metal. No, sir. They didn't get the shine. Brandon rolled his eyes. He is rambling. Just sign the paper, Calloway. Wait, Calloway said, holding up a hand. Greed flickered in his watery eyes. What metal, Mr. Bennett? Did you keep silver gold? I clamped my mouth shut, looking dartingly around the room as if listening for spies. I pulled my knees up, rocking back and forth. I promised not to tell. Granddaddy said keep it safe. Keep it deep, under the roots. The roots hold it tight. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air went still. Brandon stopped pacing. Lily, who had been hovering by the kitchen doorway looking miserable, stepped into the room. What is he talking about? Lily asked softly. He is talking about a stash, Calloway said, his voice dropping to a hush. Old-timers do this. They don't trust banks. They bury cash. They bury gold. Brandon walked over to me, kneeling down so we were eye to eye. His desperation was a palpable heat radiating off him. Doug, listen to me. What is under the roots? Which roots? I looked at him. Letting a slow, sly smile spread across my face, the kind of smile a child gives when they know a secret. The big one, I whispered. The king. The old king in the back. He guards the box. The metal box, it is heavy. So heavy. The oak tree, Brandon breathed, standing up and looking out the window toward the massive ancient oak that dominated the backyard. The old king. That is what he used to call that tree when I first met Lily. He turned back to me, gripping my shoulders. What is in the box, Doug? Is it money? Is it coins? I giggled, a high-pitched, senile sound that made my own skin crawl. It is the retirement. The real retirement. Not the paper money. The heavy money. 30 bars. 30 bars of gold. Calloway's voice cracked. Jesus, at current prices, That is, that is millions, Brandon finished, his eyes wide and wild. He looked at Lily, then at Calloway. The debt was 2 million. If there were 30 bars of gold buried in the backyard, his problems weren't just solved. They were obliterated. He wouldn't even need the loan. He wouldn't need to wait for the bank. He could dig it up and pay the syndicate tonight. But he is crazy, Lily said, her voice trembling. He is making it up. It is part of the dementia. Is it, Brandon countered, pacing again, but this time with excitement? Or is it the only thing he actually remembers? Think about it, Lily. He lived like a pauper. He never spent a dime. Why? Maybe because he was hoarding it. Maybe he converted everything to gold to hide it from the IRS. That is why he has those tax liens. He hid the assets. He turned to Calloway. Sign the paper. Declare him incompetent. Right now. If he has gold buried out there, it belongs to the estate. And if I have power of attorney, I control the estate. Calloway scribbled furiously on the clipboard. Done. Diagnosis is advanced dementia with paranoid delusions. I will certify that he cannot manage his own affairs. You are the legal guardian, effective immediately pending the filing. Brandon snatched the paper from him. Great. Now get out. What? Calloway stood up. We have a deal, Brandon. I get a cut if we find. You get your fee for the visit, Brandon shouted, shoving him toward the door. You get $500. Get out before I tell your parole officer you are impersonating a medical professional. Calloway looked at the two of us, then at Brandon's clenched fists. He decided it wasn't worth the fight. He scurried out the door, clutching his satchel. Brandon locked the door and turned to Lily. Get the shovels. But Brandon, Lily started. Get the shovels, he roared. I sat in my chair humming a tune from a commercial I hadn't heard in 20 years, watching them unravel. They had the paper they wanted. They thought they had won. But they had swallowed the hook so deep it was scraping their insides. There was no gold under the oak tree. There was only dirt roots and a septic tank line I had capped off in the 80s. But they didn't know that. They were going to dig. They were going to sweat. And while they were chasing a fantasy in the backyard, I was going to make my move in the kitchen. I waited until they were out the back door, the screen slamming shut behind them. I heard the metal clang of shovels being dragged from the shed. I stood up, shedding the tremors, shedding the confusion. I walked to the window and watched them attack the earth with a frenzy born of pure greed. Brandon was digging like a madman, destroying his Italian loafers. Lily was watching, wringing her hands. They were distracted. Perfect. I turned and walked silently to the kitchen. I reached under the sink behind the cleaning supplies and pulled out the wrench I had hidden there days ago. Then I went to the back door, unlocked it quietly, and slipped out the side entrance, moving toward the designated rendezvous point. O'Malley was waiting in the service lane behind the property, dressed in a blue jumpsuit with a plumbing and heating logo on the back. The doctor was a nice touch, O'Malley whispered as I crouched beside his van. Did he sign it? He signed it, I said. Brandon thinks he is king of the world. He thinks there is gold under the oak tree. O'Malley grinned, handing me a clipboard. Then let's make him the king of nothing. Sign this. This activates the trust's poison pill clause. The moment he tries to transfer the deed using that incompetency form, the trust freezes the land and triggers the environmental audit. I took the pen. My hand didn't shake this time. I signed Douglas Bennett with a flourish. Is the notary ready for tonight? I asked. He is ready, O'Malley said. And the restaurant reserved, I said. Table for 4. The Last Supper. I handed the clipboard back. I had to get back inside before they gave up digging. I had to be the confused old man one last time. I crept back into the house, replaced the wrench, and sat back in my chair. 10 minutes later, Brandon burst in, covered in sweat and dirt, his face red with exertion and frustration. It is deep, he panted. It must be deep. We need to keep digging. I looked up at him and smiled a vacant, empty smile. Did you find the king? I asked. Brandon ignored me, grabbing a bottle of water. Keep quiet, old man. We are going to find it. And when we do, I am putting you in the finest facility money can buy, which means I am putting you in a hole in the ground. He went back out. I watched him go. Dig, Brandon. Dig deep. You are just digging your own grave, and I am going to be the one to fill it in. The heat of the mid-morning sun was already baking the clay soil of the backyard into a brick-hard surface. From the kitchen window, I watched the spectacle of greed unfold with a detachment that surprised me. Brandon had been digging for 20 minutes, his expensive shirt ruined sweat pouring down his face, but the hole was barely a foot deep. The oak roots were ancient and stubborn, a web of iron wood protecting the earth. He was hacking at them with the shovel, cursing his desperation, making him clumsy. He stopped panting, leaning on the handle, and looked toward the driveway, where Calloway was just starting his rusted sedan. "Get back here!" Brandon screamed, his voice cracking. "Don't you leave! I need help! I saw the sedan stop!" Calloway stuck his head out. "You kicked me out, remember?" Half Brandon yelled, holding up 5 fingers. "Half the gold, just help me get it out of the ground." The car door opened before the engine even died. Greed is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs pride, caution, and common sense. Calloway ran to the shed, grabbed a pickaxe, and joined Brandon at the base of the tree. Now there were 2 of them, the desperate debtor and the fake doctor, united by the hallucination of 30 gold bars. They attacked the ground like rabid dogs. Lily stood on the porch hugging herself, watching her husband destroy the landscape of her childhood. She looked sick, but she didn't look away. She was calculating her share, too. I turned away from the window. The stage was set. The audience was captivated. It was time for the backstage crew to do their work. I moved to the sink and turned the faucet on full blast, letting the water hammer against the stainless steel basin. It was the signal. 2 minutes later, a heavy knock rattled the back door frame. Not the front door where Lily might see, but the service entrance hidden by the trellis of jasmine. I unlocked it. O'Malley stepped inside. He had committed to the role fully. He wore a grease-stained blue jumpsuit with a patch that read Al's Plumbing and carried a heavy red toolbox. He looked like every other invisible service worker these people ignored daily. He looked like salvation. "Sink's leaking," Boss O'Malley asked, loudly winking. "It is gushing," I replied, pitching my voice to carry just enough to be heard if anyone came in, but not enough to draw them away from the gold. O'Malley set the toolbox on the kitchen table and flipped the latches. He didn't take out wrenches. He took out a thick stack of legal documents bound in blue folders. He spread them out over the formica covering the fake debt letters I had left there earlier. This was the real paperwork. This was the weapon that would sever Brandon's head from his shoulders, legally speaking. "Is it clear outside?" O'Malley whispered. "They are halfway to China," I said, glancing at the window. "They think they hit a root, but they think it is the lid of the box. They won't stop until they hit water or bedrock." "Good. We have 10 minutes before heat stroke or frustration sets in." O'Malley uncapped a fountain pen, a real one this time, not the prop from the wedding. He pointed to the first document. "This is the revocation of the previous power of attorney effective immediately. It predates whatever garbage Calloway signed today. It declares you of sound mind and body, witnessed by my paralegal this morning before I came over. Sign here." I signed. My signature was sharp, aggressive. Douglas Arthur Bennett. "This next one is the trust activation." O'Malley continued, sliding a thicker document forward. "It triggers the Bennett family trust. The moment this is signed, the $30 million in the offshore holding company transfers to a domestic account under your sole control. But here is the kicker." He flipped to page 12, tapping a paragraph dense with legal jargon. "The Scorched Earth Protocol." I read it quickly. It was beautiful. It stated that any attempt to transfer, sell, or lien the property known as the Bennett estate without the direct biometric authorizations of the primary trustee would trigger an automatic environmental audit by the EPA, flagging the land as a potential hazardous waste site due to historical industrial runoff. It was a lie, mostly. My grandfather had stored some oil drums there in the 50s, but nothing dangerous. But an EPA flag freezes a property for years. No bank would touch it. No developer would buy it. And certainly no syndicate shark would accept it as payment. "If Brandon gets me to sign the deed tonight," I asked, looking up at O'Malley. "It won't matter." O'Malley grinned, his teeth white against the grime on his face. "He will own the dirt, sure. But he will also own a federal investigation and a frozen asset. The land becomes worthless to him the second he takes title. And the gold. The trust specifies that all mineral rights and buried assets are donated to the Veterans Association upon transfer of the surface rights. So even if there was gold, which we know there isn't, he wouldn't own it." "It is a trap inside a trap," I said, admiration swelling in my chest. "It is a masterpiece, Doug. Sign it." I put the pen to the paper. This was it. The moment I stopped being the victim. The moment I became the executioner. I thought about Brandon's hand on my chest pushing me. I thought about Lily's silence. I thought about the fake doctor and the $2 million of blood money hanging over my house. I didn't hesitate. I signed the document. O'Malley gathered the papers, sliding them back into the toolbox and locking it. He pulled a pipe wrench out from the bottom and banged it against the pipes under the sink a few times for effect. "All right, Mr. Bennett," he said loudly. "That should hold it for now. But you are going to need a full repiping soon. These old lines are rotted through." "Just patch it," I said, raising my voice to match his performance. "I can't afford a new system." "I will send you the bill," O'Malley said. He walked to the back door. "Tonight, 7 p.m. The restaurant. Don't be late. And wear something nice, Doug. You are a multi-millionaire now. Act like it." He slipped out. I locked the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. The adrenaline was coursing through me, making my fingertips tingle. I walked to the window. Out in the yard, the comedy had turned into a tragedy. Brandon and Calloway were waist-deep in a hole that looked more like a grave than an excavation. They were covered in mud. Brandon had discarded his shirt, his back sunburned and angry. Calloway was sitting on the edge of the dirt pile, wheezing, clutching his chest. "Keep digging!" Brandon screamed, swinging the pickaxe. I heard metal hit something hard, a dull thud that vibrated through the ground. Brandon froze. He looked at Calloway. "Did you hear that?" "I heard it," Calloway gasped, scrambling down into the hole. "It is the box. We found it." They fell to their knees, clawing at the dirt with their bare hands. I watched them uncover the object. It wasn't a gold bar. It wasn't a chest. It was the concrete lid of the old septic tank I had decommissioned 30 years ago. Brandon wiped the dirt away, revealing the rough concrete. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice carrying on the wind. "This isn't metal." "Open it!" Calloway yelled. "Maybe it is a vault, a concrete vault." They pried at the lid with the shovel. It was heavy, sealed with decades of soil and pressure. They strained, grunting, their veins popping. With a sickening, sucking sound, the seal broke. The lid shifted. The smell hit them first. Even from the house behind glass, I could imagine it. The ancient, fermented stench of a septic system that had never been properly pumped. Brandon gagged, stumbling back, dropping the shovel. Calloway covered his face with his lab coat, retching. "There is no gold." Brandon choked out, staring into the dark, foul abyss. "It is shit. It is just shit." He looked up at the house. He saw me standing in the window. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stared at him with the blank, vacant expression fit of the dementia patient he claimed I was. He roared a sound of pure, impotent rage. He scrambled out of the hole, slipping in the mud, falling onto his face and getting up again. He stormed toward the house, marching past Lily, who was holding her nose. I moved away from the window and went to the kitchen table. I sat down and waited. When Brandon burst through the back door, he was a monster made of mud and fury. He smelled awful. He was shaking. "Where is it?" he screamed, advancing on me. "Where is the gold, you lying old psychopath?" I looked up at him, blinking slowly. "Gold?" I asked innocently. "Did you find the chocolate coins Granddaddy hid them for Easter? Chocolate?" Brandon's face went purple. "You said bars. You said heavy metal." "The wrappers are foil," I whispered. "Shiny. Like gold." Brandon grabbed the edge of the table and flipped it. My bowl of oatmeal, the fake debt letters, the salt shaker. Everything went flying. He stood over me, his chest heaving. "I am going to kill you," he hissed. "I am going to bury you in that hole." Do it, I thought. Do it and go to prison for life. But he didn't. He stopped. He remembered the debt. He remembered the deadline. Killing me wouldn't get him $2 million. He needed my signature. He took a deep, shuddering breath, running his muddy hands through his hair. "Okay. Okay. You are confused. You are sick. It doesn't matter. The land is still worth money. We don't need the gold. We just need the deed." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Get dressed. We are going to dinner. We are going to celebrate. And then you are going to sign the papers. If you don't, if you mess this up, I swear to God, Doug, I will burn this house down with you inside." I looked at him, seeing the fear behind the threat. He was broken. He just didn't know it yet. "I like dinner," I said softly. "Can we have steak?" "Yes." Brandon spat. "We can have steak. Just get in the truck." I stood up and walked past him. I was going to enjoy that steak. It was going to be the most expensive meal Brandon never paid for. As I walked down the hall to change into my moth-eaten suit, I felt the weight of the trust document in my mind. The trap was sprung. The noose was tight. All that was left was the drop. The kitchen was silent except for the ragged sound of Brandon's breathing. He stood amidst the wreckage of the overturned table, his chest heaving, mud and filth caking his expensive clothes. The smell of the septic tank clung to him, a cloying reminder of his failure. I watched him from the corner where I had retreated, my back pressed against the cool plaster of the wall. I saw the moment his mind snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was a sudden, terrifying stillness. He stopped shouting. He stopped pacing. He just looked at the clock on the microwave, the green digits blinking the time. It was late afternoon. His deadline with the loan sharks was less than 24 hours away. He had wasted half the day digging for chocolate coins in a sewer, and he realized with crystal clarity that he was out of time. He turned to me. His eyes were dead. There was no family left in them, no recognition of me as a human being. I was just a stubborn lock on a vault he couldn't open. He reached onto the counter, his hand closing around the handle of a heavy chef's knife, the one I used to carve turkeys on Thanksgiving. It was sharp. I kept my tools sharp. Brandon, Lily whispered from the doorway, her voice trembling. "Put that down." He ignored her. He walked toward me, not rushing, just moving with the inevitability of a landslide. He didn't raise the knife like a movie villain. He held it low, tight against his side, the blade gleaming under the kitchen lights. He stepped into my personal space so close I could smell the sweat and the fear radiating off him. He grabbed the lapel of my old suit jacket and slammed me back against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of me. He brought the knife up, pressing the cold steel flat against the side of my neck, right over the pulse. "No more games, Doug," he whispered, his voice devoid of emotion. "No more stories about gold. No more dinner. You are going to sign the deed right now, here, on the floor." I froze. This wasn't part of the plan. O'Malley was waiting at the restaurant. The trap was set downtown, not in this kitchen. If I signed now under duress with a knife at my throat, he might actually get away with it. Or worse, once he had the signature, he might decide that a dead father-in-law was safer than a live witness. I looked into his eyes and saw the darkness there. He was considering it. He was calculating the odds. I didn't struggle. I didn't try to disarm him. I knew that any physical resistance would trigger a reflex in him and the knife would slip. I had to fight him with the only weapon that worked on men like him, greed. "You can't sell it to the bank," I wheezed, letting my eyes widen in terror. "They won't pay enough. Not for the debt. Not for the bad men." Brandon stiffened. The knife pressed harder, stinging my skin. "What did you say, Ho? How do you know about the debt?" "I heard you," I stammered, tears leaking from my eyes. "I heard you on the porch. 2 million. The bank will only give you 500,000. It is raw land, Brandon. It takes months to appraise." "You don't have months," he wavered. The logic pierced through his rage. He knew I was right. A traditional bank loan would take weeks and the appraisal would come in low. He didn't need $500,000 in 6 weeks. He needed 2 million by Friday. So what? He spat, his hand shaking. "It is better than nothing." "No," I gasped. "It is not enough. They will kill you." "But my partner, he has the cash." Brandon pulled the knife back an inch, frowning. "What partner? You said you didn't trust banks." "I don't," I cried out. "That is why I have O'Malley. He holds the money. The real money. Not the gold, the investment money. He wants the land. He has wanted it for years. He offered double." Double, Brandon repeated the word, tasting sweet on his tongue. 4 million cash, I lied, staring straight into his desperate eyes. "Tonight, he is meeting us at the steakhouse. He brings the briefcase. You sign the land to him, he gives you the cash. Tonight. No banks, no waiting." I could see the gears turning in his head. The promise of immediate cash was a narcotic. It solved everything. It paid the debt, it saved his life, and it left him with 2 million in his pocket. It was the lottery win he felt he deserved. "Why would he do that?" Brandon asked, suspicion warring with hope. "Because of the oil," I whispered, dropping the final lure. "He thinks there is oil under the shed." Brandon lowered the knife slowly. He stepped back, running a muddy hand through his hair. "Oil. Of course. That is why you wouldn't sell. You old fox." He looked at the knife in his hand, then at me. "If you are lying, Doug, if we get to that restaurant and there is no O'Malley, I will drag you out to the parking lot and I will finish this. Do you understand?" I nodded, rubbing my neck where the blade had pressed. "I understand. I want the steak, and I want Lily to be safe." Brandon let out a shuddering breath. He dropped the knife into the sink with a clatter. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Get in the truck," he ordered, his voice returning to that arrogant bark. "Lily, fix your face. We are going to dinner, and we are coming home rich." I adjusted my jacket, buttoning it with trembling fingers. I looked at Lily. She was leaning against the doorframe, pale as a ghost, staring at the sink where the knife lay. She had seen her husband hold a blade to her father's throat, and she hadn't screamed. She hadn't called the police. She had just watched. I walked past her, my heart hardening into a stone that would never crack again. I had given her every chance. Now she was on her own. We walked out to Brandon's truck. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I climbed into the back seat. Brandon got behind the wheel, his energy manic again, tapping the steering wheel, talking about what he would do with the extra 2 million. He was already spending the money. He was already celebrating. I sat in the dark watching the trees blur past. My neck still stung. The fear was slowly receding, replaced by a cold, clinical detachment. He had threatened my life. He had crossed the final line. There was no going back now. No mercy. No hesitation. As we turned onto the highway heading toward the city lights, I touched the pocket where I kept the burner phone. O'Malley was waiting. The trap was waiting. Brandon thought he was driving to his salvation. He didn't know he was driving a hearse, and I was the only one who knew the funeral had already begun. The valet looked at Brandon's mud-splattered truck with the kind of disdain usually reserved for roadkill, but Brandon tossed him a $20 bill and strode toward the entrance of the obsidian room like he owned the pavement. I followed a few paces behind, tugging at the cuffs of my suit jacket. It was a charcoal wool blend I had bought for a funeral in '98, and it hung on my frame like a bad memory. The mothball scent was a force field, repelling the well-dressed couples waiting for tables. Lily walked beside me, her head down, clutching her purse as if it contained the last scrap of her conscience. She looked beautiful in a pale blue dress, but her eyes were darting around the lobby, terrified that someone she knew might see her here with her ragged father and her manic dirt-streaked husband. We didn't have a reservation, not really. O'Malley had handled it using a name that commanded respect in circles Brandon didn't even know existed. When we reached the host stand, the maitre d', a man with a posture so rigid he looked like he had swallowed a coat hanger, scanned us with a practiced sneer. He lingered on my scuffed work boots, which I hadn't bothered to change. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting that the service entrance was around the back. Bennett Brandon barked, leaning over the podium. "Party of 4. We are meeting a Mr. O'Malley. And we want the private booth in the back. The corner one." The maitre d' raised an eyebrow, checking his tablet. "Ah, yes. Mr. O'Malley's party." He looked surprised, perhaps disappointed that he couldn't kick us out. "Right this way." He led us through the dining room. It was a cavern of dark wood velvet and the soft clink of silver on china. The air smelled of truffle oil and old money. Heads turned as we passed. I saw the whispers. I saw the judgment. They saw a young, aggressive man, a nervous woman, and an old derelict who looked like he had wandered in from a bus stop. Brandon felt their eyes, too. He gripped my elbow, his fingers digging into the nerve. "Walk faster, Doug," he hissed in my ear. "You are dragging your feet. Try not to look so vacant. You are embarrassing us." I stumbled slightly, playing the part. "It is dark in here," I mumbled loud enough for a woman eating a salad to hear. "Is the power out?" Brandon shoved me forward. "Just sit down." We reached the booth. It was secluded, shadowed, the perfect place for a conspiracy. Brandon slid in, dragging Lily with him. I sat opposite them, sinking into the plush leather. It felt too soft, like quicksand. Brandon didn't look at the menu. He looked at his watch. He drummed his fingers on the white tablecloth, leaving faint smudges of dirt he hadn't managed to scrub off. "He is late," Brandon muttered. "It is 7:05. "Where is he?" "If you lied to me, Doug." "He comes from the city," I said, staring at the candle flickering in the center of the table. "Traffic is bad. The bridge gets stuck." Brandon flagged down a waiter with a snap of his fingers. "Whiskey, double, top shelf, and bring a wine list for the lady." "And for the gentleman," the waiter asked, looking at me. "He will have water," Brandon said dismissively. "Tap. He doesn't know the difference." I didn't argue. I folded my hands in my lap and watched my daughter. She was staring at the bread basket, tearing a roll into tiny pieces, but not eating them. "Lily," I said softly. She looked up, startled. "Do you remember this place?" I asked. "We came here for your graduation. You had the lobster." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She looked away. "Stop it, Dad. Please. Just don't." "She is right," Brandon snapped. "No nostalgia. We are here for business. We are here to fix the mess you made with your hoarding and your debt. Keep your mouth shut until O'Malley gets here. And when he does, you nod, you smile, and you sign whatever he puts in front of you. Do you understand? I nodded, looking at the water glass the waiter placed in front of me. I understood perfectly. I understood that my son-in-law was a man who would sell his soul for a quick fix. And tonight, I was the devil coming to collect. 10 minutes passed. Brandon drank 2 whiskeys. He was vibrating with tension, checking his phone under the table every 30 seconds. I knew what he was looking for. Messages from the syndicate. Threats. Timelines. He was a man standing on a trap door with a noose around his neck, waiting for gravity to do its job. Then the atmosphere in the room shifted. You can always tell when real power walks into a room. It isn't loud. It doesn't snap its fingers for service. It just occupies space in a way that makes everyone else move aside. O'Malley entered the dining room. He wasn't wearing the grease-stained jumpsuit anymore. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Brandon's car. His silver hair was slicked back, his shoes gleamed like obsidian, and he carried himself with the easy, terrifying confidence of a man who ruins lives for a living. In his left hand, handcuffed to his wrist, was a brushed aluminum briefcase. It was theater, of course. O'Malley was a lawyer, not a mobster, but he knew that Brandon needed to see a savior, and saviors in Brandon's world looked like high-end criminals. Brandon saw him. His jaw dropped. He stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his water glass. The arrogance vanished, replaced instantly by a fawning, desperate obsequiousness. He buttoned his jacket, wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, and put on a smile that looked painful. "Mr. O'Malley," he called out, perhaps a bit too loudly. Over here, O'Malley didn't rush. He took his time scanning the room, letting the waiter pull out his chair. He sat down next to me, placing the metal briefcase on the table with a heavy, solid thud. The sound resonated through the booth, silencing Brandon. "Mr. Bennett," O'Malley said, turning to me first. He extended a hand. "Good to see you again, Douglas." I took his hand. It was dry and firm. "Hello, Arthur," I said, using his middle name, the one we used for the persona. "Did you bring the papers?" O'Malley smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "I brought everything." Brandon was still standing, hovering like an anxious waiter. He cleared his throat. "Hi, I'm Brandon, Doug's son-in-law. We spoke on the... Well, we didn't speak, but Doug told me about the deal." O'Malley turned his gaze to Brandon. He looked him up and down, lingering on the mud stains on Brandon's cuffs and the desperation in his eyes. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer a hand. "Sit down, son." O'Malley said, his voice a low rumble. "You are blocking the view." Brandon sat flushed and humiliated, but he couldn't take his eyes off the briefcase. It sat there between them, a silver monolith of promise. So Brandon said, his voice trembling slightly. "Doug says you are interested in the property. The 50 acres. "I am interested in the mineral rights," O'Malley corrected smoothly. "The land is incidental. Doug tells me there is a significant deposit under the north shed." "Oil," Brandon blurted out. "Yes. Oil. We were digging today. We found signs." I stifled a cough to hide my amusement. He was lying to a man who knew exactly what was in that hole. "Excellent," O'Malley said, tapping the case. "My geologists agree. That is why I am prepared to offer a cash buyout. Immediate transfer. No banks, no escrow." "Cash," Brandon breathed. "How much?" O'Malley leaned forward. $4 million. Lily gasped. Brandon looked like he might pass out. $4 million. It was double the debt. It was freedom. It was a new life. He looked at the briefcase, imagining the stacks of bills inside. He licked his lips. That sounds acceptable," Brandon stammered, trying to sound like a shrewd negotiator and failing miserably. "We accept." "Right, Doug, we accept." I took a sip of my water. I don't know, I said slowly, playing the hesitation. It is my grandfather's land. He liked the trees. Brandon kicked me under the table. Hard. Sign the deal, old man, he hissed through a clenched smile. O'Malley ignored the outburst. He unlocked the handcuffs from his wrist, the click of the mechanism loud in the quiet booth. He spun the briefcase around so the latches faced Brandon. I like to do business simply, O'Malley said. I have the deed transfer right here. You sign, I open the case. The funds are yours. Tonight. Brandon reached for the briefcase, his hands shaking. Can I see it first? O'Malley placed a hand over the latches. Signature first. That is how the world works, son. You give something to get something. Brandon looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading, threatening, a toxic mix of emotions. Doug signed the paper. Please, do it for Lily. Do it for the family. I looked at Lily. She was staring at the briefcase, too mesmerized. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't wondering why a stranger was offering $4 million in cash for a swamp. She was just seeing the exit sign. Fine, I said, my voice heavy with resignation. I will sign. O'Malley pulled a document from his inner pocket. It wasn't the deed. It was the environmental liability transfer form, disguised under a standard cover sheet. He placed it in front of me. I pulled a pen from my pocket, my own pen, and signed Douglas Arthur Bennett with a steady hand. There, I said. It is done. Brandon grabbed the paper, staring at the signature like it was a holy relic. He laughed a high, giddy sound. You did it. You actually did it. He looked at O'Malley. Okay. He signed. Open the case. Give us the money. O'Malley smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who just sprang a trap. Certainly, O'Malley said. He flipped the latches. The sound was sharp, decisive. He lifted the lid. Brandon leaned in his face, glowing with greed. Lily leaned in. I leaned back. The briefcase wasn't full of cash. It wasn't full of gold. It contained a single thick binder bound in blue leather stamped with gold letters, the Bennett Family Trust, Asset Portfolio. And on top of the binder sat a single crisp business card. Brandon stared at the binder. He blinked. What is this? Where is the money? O'Malley pulled the binder out and opened it to the first page. It was a bank statement. The balance at the bottom was bolded $30,000, $1,000 on terms. Brandon read the number. He read it again. He looked at O'Malley. He looked at me. His face went slack. 30 million, he whispered. Whose money is this? It is Doug's money, O'Malley said, his voice dropping the pretense, becoming the voice of the lawyer he truly was. And it has been Doug's money for 2 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Brandon looked at me, and for the first time he didn't see a broke mechanic. He didn't see a senile old man. He saw the truth, and the truth terrified him. You have $30 million, Brandon choked out. I took another sip of water. I set the glass down gently. Yes, Brandon, I do. And then I smiled. Not the vacant smile of the dementia patient, the sharp, cold smile of the man who had built that fortune. And you, I said softly, just bought yourself a $5 million fine and a plot of toxic dirt. Enjoy the steak. It is the last thing you are ever going to own. The blue leather binder sat on the white tablecloth like a heavy stone slab. It didn't look like salvation. It looked like accounting. Brandon stared at the number at the bottom of the page, his lips moving silently as he counted the zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He blinked, rubbing his eyes with grimy knuckles, thinking perhaps the dim lighting of the steakhouse was playing tricks on him. He looked up at O'Malley, then at me, then back at the page. The arrogance that had fueled him for days, the manic energy that had driven him to hold a knife to my throat, simply evaporated. It was replaced by a hollow, terrifying comprehension. 30 million, Brandon whispered the words barely escaping his throat. This says $30 million. It is a trust portfolio, O'Malley said, his voice calm and professional, cutting through the silence of our booth. Established by Archibald Bennett in 1955. It matured 2 years ago on Douglas's 70th birthday. It includes stocks, bonds, and significant holdings in precious metals. It is fully liquid. Brandon looked at me. His face was pale, the blood draining away so fast he looked like a corpse. He was running the math in his head. He was realizing that the man he had shoved, the man he had insulted, the man he had tried to bury in a basement was worth more than the entire syndicate he owed money to. He realized that if he had just been kind, if he had just been a decent human being, he never would have phoned to dig a hole in the backyard. You knew, Brandon stammered. You knew the whole time. I took a slow sip of water. I knew, I said simply. I have known for 40 years that the money was coming. I just didn't care about it. I liked my life. I liked my truck. I liked my quiet house. Lily let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She reached out her hand, trembling, and touched the edge of the binder. Dad, she breathed. Why didn't you tell us? We were struggling. We were so stressed. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see who you were without it. I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. And you showed me. You showed me exactly who you are. The reality of the situation hit Brandon like a physical blow. He wasn't looking at a victim anymore. He was looking at a king. And kings have the power to pardon. The realization twisted his face into a mask of pathetic desperation. He slid out of the booth. He didn't stand up. He dropped to his knees on the plush carpet of the restaurant, ignoring the stares of the diners around us. He clasped his hands together, looking up at me like I was a deity. Doug, Dad, please, he begged, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. The stress, the debt. It made me crazy. I wasn't myself. You know that, right? You know I love you. We are family. He reached for my hand, his fingers muddy and desperate. I pulled back. Family, I repeated. Family doesn't hold a knife to a throat, Brandon. Family doesn't try to have you declared insane. Lily slid down next to him, grabbing my arm. Dad, please listen to him. We were scared. We made mistakes. But we can fix this. We can start over. You have the money now. We can pay off the debt. We can buy a big house for all of us. You won't have to live in the basement. You can have the master suite. We will take care of you, I promise. I looked down at them. My daughter and her husband kneeling in the dirt of their own making, begging not for forgiveness, but for access. They didn't see the pain they had caused. They only saw the zeros in the ledger. They thought the money was the solution. They thought that because I was rich, I would save them. O'Malley watched them with a look of pure disgust. He closed the binder with a snap. Mr. Bennett has signed the transfer, O'Malley said, cold. The deal is done. Brandon's head snapped up. Hope flared in his eyes. The transfer. He remembered the paper I had just signed. He thought it was the deed. He thought he had won. Right, Brandon scrambled up, pulling Lily with him. You signed it. You signed the land to O'Malley for $4 million cash. That is great. That is perfect. We can take the $4 million, pay the debt, and you keep the $30 million. We are all safe. Dad, thank you. Thank you for saving us. He was laughing now, a hysterical, manic sound. He reached for the briefcase again. Open it, Mr. O'Malley. Give us the cash. We need to go, I watched him reach for the silver case, knowing that inside there was no cash. There was only paper. And on that paper was the final nail in his coffin. I didn't stop him. I wanted him to open it. I wanted him to see that the only thing he had inherited was the consequences of his own greed. Brandon's fingers were inches from the silver latches of the briefcase when O'Malley's hand clamped down on his wrist. It wasn't a violent move, but it was absolute. It was the grip of a man who controlled the room, the building, and the future of everyone sitting at the table. "That is not for you," O'Malley said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "That briefcase does not contain cash, son. It contains the trust documents, and you are not a beneficiary." Brandon froze, his eyes darting between the metal case and O'Malley's stone-cold face. Confusion warped his features. "But the deal," he stammered, pulling his hand back as if he had been burned. "The $4 million. You said you were buying the land. You said you had the cash." O'Malley leaned back, smoothing his silk tie. "I said I was interested in the mineral rights. I never said I was buying them. In fact, my due diligence is complete, and I am afraid I have to pass. The liability is simply too high." "Liability?" Brandon's voice pitched up, cracking. "What liability?" "There is oil down there," Doug said. There was oil. I watched Brandon unravel. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folded document I had signed minutes ago. I smoothed it out on the table, pushing aside the untouched water glass. It wasn't a sale agreement to O'Malley. It was the quitclaim deed transferring the 50 acres of Bennett land directly to Brandon Miller. "You wanted the land, Brandon," I said softly. "You fought for it. You lied for it. You held a knife to my throat in my own kitchen for it. So take it." I slid the paper across the tablecloth. It stopped right in front of him. The ink of my signature was still wet, glistening black under the chandelier light. Brandon looked at the paper. He looked at me. A slow, confused smile spread across his face. You signed it over to me," he asked, unable to believe his luck. "I did," I nodded. "It is yours. The house, the shed, the trees, the dirt, all of it. You are the sole owner of record as of this moment." Brandon grabbed the paper, clutching it like a winning lottery ticket. He laughed, a breathless, hysterical sound. "I have the land. I have the collateral. I can take this to the syndicate. I can show them I have the asset. They will give me an extension. They might even lend me more against the equity." He turned to Lily, shaking the paper. "We did it, babe. We own it. We are safe." O'Malley cleared his throat. It was a dry, dismissive sound that cut through Brandon's celebration like a guillotine. "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Mr. Miller, O'Malley said. "Before you rush off to your creditors, you should probably be aware of what exactly you just acquired." Brandon paused, the paper halfway to his pocket. "What do you mean?" "It is 50 acres of prime real estate. It is 50 acres of an Environmental Protection Agency designated Superfund site." O'Malley corrected, sliding a second document across the table. It was a thick report with a red cover stamped "hazardous." Brandon stared at it. "What, my grandfather didn't just store oil drums," I said, my voice calm and steady. "He stored industrial runoff, solvents, lead, arsenic. It leaked, Brandon. It leaked deep. The EPA flagged it in 1985. They fined the estate $5 million for remediation." $5 million, Brandon whispered, the color draining from his face. "Plus interest," O'Malley added cheerfully. "And daily penalties for non-compliance. The fine attaches to the title, not the person. Doug here was protected because the land was held in a passive trust that claimed insolvency. But you just accepted a personal transfer. You just voluntarily assumed the title. That means you voluntarily assumed the debt." Brandon looked at the deed in his hand. He dropped it like it was coated in anthrax. No, I don't want it. Take it back. Too late, O'Malley said. The transfer is executed. You are the owner of record, and since you are now the owner of a toxic waste site, the federal government has an immediate lien on all your other assets to cover the cleanup costs. Your car seized, your future wages garnished. That syndicate debt, you can't use the land to pay it, because the land has a negative value of $5 million. You are not rich, son. You are destitute. Lily let out a wail, burying her face in her hands. Brandon stood up, knocking his chair over. He looked wild, trapped. He looked at the blue binder on the table, the $30 million. The money, he screamed, pointing at the trust portfolio. Use the money, Doug. You have $30 million. Pay the fine. Pay the debt. We are family. You have to help us. I looked at the binder. I reached out and rested my hand on the cool leather cover. I can't, I said. What do you mean you can't? Brandon roared, lunging forward, stopped only by the glare. O'Malley shot him. It is your money. It was my money, I corrected. But you see, Brandon, my grandfather was a suspicious man. He put a clause in the trust. Clause 7, subsection B. It is called the duress protocol. O'Malley opened the binder to the last page. He tapped a paragraph highlighted in yellow. It states, O'Malley read aloud, that if the primary beneficiary transfers any real estate assets to a family member under coercion, threat of violence, or whilst under the care of a physician for mental incompetence, which your friend Dr. Calloway so kindly certified this morning, the entire principle of the trust is immediately and irrevocably liquidated. Liquidated, Brandon breathed. Where does it go? To the Wounded Warrior Project and the National Mechanics Pension Fund? I said, a small cold smile touching my lips. Because you threatened me, because you declared me insane, and because you forced me to sign that deed, you triggered the clause. The wire transfer happened the moment my pen left the paper. I opened the binder and turned it upside down. It was empty. The statements were void. The money is gone, Brandon. All 30 million of it. I gave it away to save it from you. Brandon fell back against the booth wall, sliding down until he hit the seat. He stared at me with eyes that were hollowed out by shock. He had lost everything. He had dug a hole for gold and found shit. He had tried to steal a house and bought a $5 million fine. He had chased a fortune and watched it vanish into thin air. You gave away $30 million, he whispered, his voice cracking. Just to spite me, I leaned across the table, getting close enough to smell the fear on him. I didn't do it to spite you, Brandon. I did it because $30 million is a cheap price to pay for my freedom. And seeing the look on your face right now, that is priceless. The silence in the booth was shattered not by a scream, but by the rhythmic strobing wash of blue and red lights flooding through the restaurant's plate glass windows. The sirens cut the air a second later, a wailing chorus that made the other diners drop their forks. Brandon didn't move. He was slumped in the corner of the booth, staring at the empty binder, as if he could will the numbers back onto the page. He looked like a man whose soul had been evicted from his body. O'Malley checked his watch, snapping the metal cuff of his wrist back into place. Right on time, he murmured, taking a sip of his wine. I took the liberty of calling the authorities before I arrived, Brandon. You see, confining an elderly man to his home, confiscating his communication devices, and brandishing a weapon to force a signature isn't just bad manners. It is felony kidnapping, elder abuse, and extortion. And since I am an officer of the court, I had a moral obligation to report a crime in progress. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit marched into the dining room, guided by the maitre d', who looked like he was about to faint. They spotted us immediately. They didn't ask questions. They had the report. They had the evidence O'Malley had forwarded from my burner phone recordings. Brandon Miller, the detective, said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Stand up. You are under arrest. Brandon stood up slowly, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. He held out his wrists as if he were surrendering to a fate he finally understood he couldn't outrun. As the metal clicked shut, he looked at me one last time. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, just a vast, emptying void. He was thinking about the syndicate. He was thinking that a jail cell might be the only place safe enough to keep him alive for the next 24 hours. They marched him out past the staring crowds, past the waiters holding trays of untouched food. Lily sat frozen, watching her husband be dragged away. Then the reality of her solitude crashed down on her. She turned to me, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks, reaching for my hand across the table. "Dad," she sobbed, her voice high and thin. "Dad, what do I do? They took him. You gave away the money. We have nothing. You can't leave me like this. I am your daughter." I stood up, buttoning my old suit jacket. I looked down at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my little girl. I saw a stranger who had watched a knife pressed to my throat and calculated her profit margin. "You are not my daughter," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "My daughter died the moment she chose greed over her father. You are just the wife of a felon who owns a toxic waste dump. I suggest you get a lawyer, Lily, and a job." I turned my back on her, wailing. I walked away from the table, leaving the empty binder and the signed deed sitting there as monuments to their failure. O'Malley fell into step beside me as we walked through the hushed restaurant. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Well played, Douglas," he said softly. "Where will you go?" I stopped at the valet stand. The boy brought my rusted Ford F-150 around, the engine rattling with a sound that was music to my ears. I took the keys. "North," I said. "I have a little cabin in Montana I bought years ago with my own mechanic's wages. It is small, it is quiet, and the fishing is good. I didn't need $30 million. I had $300,000 in my personal savings, a truck that ran, and a heart that was finally truly free of the burden of carrying people who refused to walk." I climbed into the cab and rolled down the window. The night air smelled of exhaust and jasmine. It smelled like victory. I put the truck in gear and pulled out onto the main road, merging into the stream of traffic. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me but ash and ruin. Ahead of me, the road was open, dark, and endless. I turned on the radio, found a station playing old country, and drove. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't driving home. I was just driving. And that was enough. I learned that $30 million is just paper. It can buy mansions and cars, but it cannot buy integrity, and it certainly cannot buy a spine. Brandon and Lily thought wealth was the destination, but it turned out to be nothing more than a magnifying glass. It showed exactly who they were: small, hollow people willing to trade their souls for a shortcut. I walked away with a fraction of that fortune, but I kept the only thing that actually matters: the ability to look in the mirror without flinching. You don't need a trust fund to be rich. You just need to know what you are not willing to sell. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of karma coming back around. Let me know in the comments. Would you have given away the $30 million, or would you have kept it just to spite them?